I'm going to call the February 25th, 2025 Beaverton Urban Redevelopment Agency meeting to order. Will the recorder please call the roll?
Councillor Hartmeyer Prigg.
Here.
Sorry, Board Member Hassan.
Here.
Board Member Kimmy.
Here.
Board Member Teeter.
Here.
Chair Teeter. Board Member Tivnon.
Here.
Beatty.
Here.
Hanning.
Here.
Nye. No Jennifer? Okay. Lear.
Here.
And my understanding, Chair Teeter, is that board members Duggar and Walton are absent tonight.
Yep, that's correct. Excused.
Oh, I've been informed Jennifer Nye just joined, so I'll mark her as present. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, well, welcome everybody. The first item on our agenda tonight is visitor comment. So visitors will be allowed to speak with Bureau for matters not included on tonight's agenda. Recording secretary, do we have anybody who is here to address the Bureau board?
No, neither online nor in person.
Okay, great. Well, we will move on to the board communications. Do any board members have any information that they would like to share with the rest of the board and or the executive director? If you do, you can feel free to put your name in the chat. Help me know who wants to speak. Okay, I'm not seeing anybody, so we will move on again. Go on to the consent agenda. There is a change here. We are moving the Bureau Bill 2025-06, Bureau Annual Financial Statement and Financial Report for the fiscal year 2024 to the consent agenda. We're also considering two sets of Bureau minutes for our consideration tonight. Those are June 25th and August 27th, 2024. So that's our agenda, our consent agenda package. Do I have a motion for these consent agenda items?
Second.
You mean motion?
Oh, sorry. Yeah. Still transitioning from a long work day. I move to approve the consent agenda as listed.
I'll second.
Okay. Thank you, Board Member Tivnon and Mayor Beatty. Okay. Let's have a roll call. Reporter.
Board Member Hartmeyer Prigg.
Yes.
Hassan.
Yes.
Kimmy.
Yes.
Teeter.
Yes.
Tivnon.
Yes.
Beatty.
Yes.
Hanning.
Yes.
Nye.
Yes.
Lear.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Great. Thank you, everybody. Okay, let's move on to our first order of business tonight, Bureau Bill 2025-07, policies on the source and uses of Bureau program income discussion. So Bureau's consultant, Nick Papanuk of Tiberius Solutions, and staff will provide a presentation on the draft program income policies and resolution for consideration in April. So welcome back, Nick. It's always good to see you. So please go ahead when you're ready.
Thank you. And I'm not sure if Tyler had any opening comments here. And Tyler, are you looking for me to share the PowerPoint, or do you guys have it loaded up over there? I can do either way.
Yeah, actually, I think the council chambers, do you have that? If not, we can run it from here, or Nick, if you've got it, you can run it either way.
I can go ahead and pull it up.
Okay, great.
Perfect.
Thank you. Board members, I'm pleased to introduce Nick Papanek. Nick from Tiberius Solution has been with us a few times in the last few years, and we are at the kind of the ending point for our program income strategy conversation. We do not expect to have a motion tonight. We will be taking your thoughts of where we are with the policies, and there's a draft resolution for you to ponder, but the final one we expect to be in April. So Nick, let's rock and roll here.
Sounds good. Thank you, Tyler. So if we go to the next slide. Tonight, for this meeting, we're going to quickly have a recap of what program income is. So I think this group has a better understanding of it, of maybe any other group that is meeting out there in the world today. We will then go through the revised draft program income policies. We have a slide for each one, and I'll provide some comments on how they've changed since the last time we discussed them with you. We'll talk about the draft resolution and the next steps towards having that resolution ready for you to adopt. And then there's some questions for you. And I think the next slide shows a preview of those questions. So do you have any concerns about any of the policy proposals? Is there anything important that you think these policy proposals have missed? And are there any details you want to make sure are addressed prior to final policy language? So next slide. Just a reminder on what is program income. Program income is easiest to define by what it isn't. So program income is any urban renewal revenues other than TIF or the debt secured by a pledge of TIF. And why is program income important or special? And it's because it is not subject to the same restrictions that TIF is. Most importantly, it's not subject to the maximum indebtedness limit. So as we move on a few years or a decade or so from now, and the Bureau achieves its maximum indebtedness, you're not going to be able to spend TIF on projects anymore, but program income can continue to be spent on projects. Similarly, it's not subject to the project allocations that were approved by voters. Those allocations for specific amounts to project categories are tied to the maximum indebtedness, and so program income allows you to spend more in certain categories to reflect changing priorities for the community since the original allocations were approved. And it's also not restricted by geography. TIF can only be spent inside the plan area boundary. This has the ability to be spent anywhere in the city, though when we get to our policy on geographic expenditures, we are recommending it be more limited than that based on feedback that you gave us back in October. That doesn't mean that program income can be spent on anything, but it does have pretty broad powers. Statutes go into those powers a little bit more in detail, but the broadest section of statutes allow you to spend these dollars on any other housing or community development activities that are specifically delegated to Bureau by the city of Beaverton. So any housing or community development activities is a pretty broad list of items that you can spend program income on. And our next slide. So just to remind everybody sort of how we got here, in October, we met with you with preliminary thoughts on what would be in the policy proposals. We weren't focused on wordsmithing at that point in time. We were focused on the big picture and making sure that we had the right concepts. And you did provide us some good feedback at that October meeting. After that, we also met with URAC in December and again in early February to get their input on the proposed policy language. And we've had multiple discussions with Bureau and city staff along the way where we've continued to refine and really focus on the specific language that would go into the resolution. Next. So now we're getting to the actual policy language itself. Just for the benefit of any folks in the audience that haven't had a chance to review the language, I think we will read through each one of these in detail, and then I will provide a couple of comments on what has changed since you saw this last time in October. There may be things to discuss about each and every one of these 12 policy proposals, but I suspect for the efficiency of this meeting, I will run through all 12, and then we'll have comments and discussion on any of them. Though if there's a really pressing question or comment, you all are in control, so by all means, feel free to interrupt me at any point to ask questions or make comments. Oh, so if we hop back to that first policy really quick. Policy 1, the proposed language, generating program income is a subordinate priority to other adopted Bureau and city goals. The pursuit of program income must be consistent with the Central Beaverton Urban Renewal Plan and Bureau's 5-year action plan. The changes that we made from the last time you saw this language is really to be more specific in citing the Central Beaverton Urban Renewal Plan and Bureau's 5-year action plan. Because the city has so many different documents and plans that specify goals and objectives and priorities, and those shift over time, we wanted to make sure that we were including really specific mentions of the documents that are most central to setting the policies here. So while this is subordinate to other adopted Bureau and city goals, we really wanted to make sure we were pointing folks in the direction of the urban renewal plan and the 5-year action plan. And in particular, that 5-year action plan is meant to be a living document where you are setting current policy priorities for Bureau. And those priorities, while still always referencing the original urban renewal plan, they can be where you really are reflecting what are the top priorities and concerns for the city at that point in time. So if we go to policy 2, we've really tried to expand and balance the list of objectives that are shown here to reflect a wider range of public benefits, while explicitly stating that public return on investment is not limited to any of the specific items listed here. There could be certainly other objectives that are consistent with public return on investment. The policy language itself, when making strategic expenditures or entering into partnerships, Bureau will seek to optimize the public return on investment, implementing guiding plans and policies, including but not limited to the following objectives: increase taxable assessed value, strengthen the local economy and increase employment opportunities, increase number of housing units, improve local infrastructure, activate downtown and other commercial areas, including new amenities and attractions, generate program income. I will say that on this particular policy, we had a lot of active discussion, both with staff and with URAC. In defining something as broad as public return on investment, you can go a lot of different directions. And at one point, we had really detailed language in here, referring to what types of jobs, what types of housing units, what constitutes local infrastructure. Ultimately, we wound up recommending shorter, higher level language without trying to get too bogged down into the weeds, especially recognizing this is a policy document, and this is not meant to be an exhaustive list, but an exemplary list. I will say one particular thing to point out here is in the last version of this that we brought to URAC, there was one more item on the list that's been taken off, and I do think it's something that we'd like to get more comments and discussion on this evening, which was a bullet point regarding diversity, equity, and inclusion. In meeting with staff, it was staff that recommended we include a bullet point to address that topic. And I certainly think that in the current political climate, there's maybe been no more important time to show a support for diversity, equity, and inclusion. The language that we came up with was more wordy. We pulled it from the Downtown Equity Plan. It didn't really fit with the other examples of objectives that we had on the list. When we spoke with URAC, the language that we had seemed more confusing than helpful. And in referencing the particular Downtown Equity Plan, it got away from what we were trying to do in other bullet points or other policies here, where we're not referring to a host of specific plans, but really trying to tie folks back to the urban renewal plan and the 5-year action plan. So I think there was some challenges with the particular wording that we had for the last meeting with URAC. It's been taken off of the list for now, but I do think it's a discussion for this group when we're defining what these public return on investment objectives might be. Is there a place on this list for DEI? Is that a policy direction that we want to make clear, including with all these other examples of those public benefits? And if we go to our next policy. So policy 3, program income generation. When disposing of Bureau-owned property, Bureau should seek to maximize program income through proceeds from land sales, along with other measures of public return on investment and consistent with Bureau's 5-year action plan. If you recall back in October when we talked about this, the language was different, and I think the focus was on the word maximize. And there's this tension about, are we overly emphasizing generating program income, or is it important to have that emphasis, and we don't want to make sure that we're too weak and are not encouraging program income generation enough? Ultimately, as we revised this language, we wanted to keep that word maximize, and make sure that the generation of program income is along with the other measures of public return on investment. So we aren't trying to elevate this above all those other measures we talked about: job creation, housing unit creation, assessed value growth, that this is one of those objectives for public return on investment, but we do want to maximize program income along with those other measures. So hopefully we've struck the right balance of maximizing and encouraging program income without suggesting that it trumps those other important measures of community benefit as well. On policy 4, this is the exact same language, but instead of talking about proceeds from land sales, we're talking about lease income from properties that Bureau intends on holding for a period of time rather than just selling. So when managing Bureau-owned property, Bureau should seek to maximize program income through lease income, along with other measures of public return on investment and consistent with Bureau's 5-year action plan. We go to policy 5. I would say that policy 5 is the policy that had the most discussion with city staff. It has gone through several iterations. Some iterations, this policy was multiple pages long, filled with great detail on what loan programs might look like and include. And ultimately, it comes to you tonight in this much abbreviated version of the policy, where we're looking at one paragraph rather than multiple pages. The policy language that we've come up with is, when structuring public-private partnerships, and I think we actually want to change that to just saying when structuring partnerships. You may be looking at public-public partnerships or nonprofit partnerships, but when structuring partnerships, Bureau should consider loans as more favorable than grants when revenue from loan repayment is expected to exceed the cost of administering the loans, and when city staff has capacity to administer the loans. Bureau may establish loan programs with clear guidelines. Individual loans must be approved by the Bureau board. So ultimately, rather than trying to get into the weeds of exactly what a loan program would include, how you're going to set interest rates, how you're going to decide which properties are eligible, what parameters you're going to have when distributing those loans, it was determined that that was just too much for this policy level document. This particular language makes it clear that Bureau may establish loan programs, and those programs would go into those multiple pages of what are we trying to accomplish, what are the goals, how do you apply, how much money are we setting aside for these particular loan program, how are we evaluating applications and scoring applicants to determine who's going to receive these loans. All that stuff would go into a program, but we're not defining all of it here in the high-level program income policy recommendations. And then this final sentence about the individual loans being approved by the Bureau board is just making it clear that even though we are setting this policy where we are setting up loans to be preferable to grants, that doesn't mean that the Bureau staff or city staff are going to just run away with this and be handing out loans left and right. That anytime loans are negotiated with an individual project, that those loan terms would be coming back to the Bureau board for approval. Nothing would be happening in terms of giving out loans without board approval. Number 6 is when we start to talk about parking revenue. This policy language combines and simplifies 2 different policy concepts that we originally brought to you in October. So the new language says parking garage rates should be set at appropriate levels to effectively manage parking demand as part of an area-wide parking management plan, consistent with any adopted parking studies completed by Bureau or the city. And parking fines and fees should be set in accordance with city code and Oregon revised statutes. So as part of simplifying this language, one thing that really came loud and clear from your staff that work on the parking program is that the entire goal of the parking program is really to manage parking demand as part of this area-wide parking management plan. That the garage doesn't exist in a vacuum, but it's part of this broader parking ecosystem. And that as you're setting rates and generating income from the garage, it's being done in a way that manages that entire parking supply and demand issue. The next policy, number 7, this also combines and simplifies 2 previous policy proposals. This is talking about the use of parking garage revenues. Where we simplified things was really cutting back language on exactly how any reserve fund might be calculated or determined. We wanted to make sure that the tail wasn't wagging the dog here, that the program income policy isn't getting too into the weeds of how you're determining the appropriate amount of a parking garage reserve fund. The key thing here is that you would need to fund a reserve before you're able to use these dollars for other projects unassociated with parking. So the language states parking garage revenues should be spent on the following uses in order of priority. A, parking garage maintenance and operations. B, parking garage necessary capital improvements. C, parking garage reserve fund, as determined by any parking garage reserve analysis adopted by Bureau or the city. And D, other eligible uses of program income. We get to policy 8. Now we're talking about uses of the parking compliance revenues. And this really remains mostly unchanged from what we brought to you back in October. The one difference is that we emphasized that this should be focusing on Bureau expenses, as this is currently housed within Bureau. So parking compliance revenue should be spent on the following uses in order of priority. A, Bureau cost recovery for collection and adjudication of fines and fees. B, Bureau parking compliance operations. And C, other eligible uses of program income. Get to policy 9. And this is a critical policy here, and one that has had a significant change since the last time we talked. And this change really was directed by your comments at the last meeting in October. So this is broadly describing the uses of program income. And as we mentioned at the beginning of this presentation tonight, you could spend these dollars anywhere in the city on any housing or community development project. Really broad latitude and statute for how you could spend these dollars. And the language that we have here recommends that you be more restrictive with your revenues than that broad authority. So it says eligible uses of program income include the following in order of priority. A, public projects within the Central Beaverton Urban Renewal Plan area, identified in the Central Beaverton Urban Renewal Plan, that would otherwise have insufficient funding due to the limited allocation of maximum indebtedness authority. B, the extension of public projects and programs identified in the Central Beaverton Urban Renewal Plan to adjacent areas beyond the geographic boundary of the Central Beaverton Urban Renewal Plan. And C, projects and programs that are not identified in the Central Beaverton Urban Renewal Plan, but that are located within the Central Beaverton, looks like that cut off, but within the Central Beaverton Urban Renewal Plan area. So what we took off was what would have been D, which would have allowed you to spend these dollars on any project that's housing or economic development anywhere in the city of Beaverton. So we really are focusing first on the projects inside the boundary that are already identified in the plan, but maybe don't have enough funding through maximum indebtedness to be able to complete them. Then looking at that project list and saying, gosh, it sure would be nice if we could extend this project or this program, give grants to a developer that's just a few blocks outside of the area, anywhere into these adjacent areas outside of the boundary, but close to it and connected to it. Note that we didn't try to define in that policy. Oops, we ran away there. I think back one more. Yeah, we didn't try to be overly prescriptive here as to what exactly is meant by adjacent. We're not trying to say within a 500-foot halo or 2 blocks or whatever the case is. We also didn't say that these are the priorities, but that you have to complete every last dollar of category A before you can move on to spending something in line item B or C here. So we wanted to make sure that we had clear policy direction while still retaining a fair amount of flexibility to the Bureau board during the annual budget process to be able to make decisions on what's the most important projects for you to fund and where to fund those projects. Policy 10, these last two, policy 10 and 11, I guess we only have 11 of these now, not 12. No significant changes to these last two. These are really sort of the housekeeping, legal, sort of administrative policies that we needed to have in here. So policy 10 says, for any use of program income other than funding a public project identified in the plan located within the geographic boundary of the plan or specific powers granted by the Oregon Revised Statutes, the city of Beaverton must specifically authorize Bureau to undertake the activity consistent with the limitations described in Oregon Revised Statutes. So that's just, again, a housekeeping measure. If you're if you're going to spend money as an urban renewal agency, you need to be specifically designated to do so by the city of Beaverton. And things that are already in your adopted plan and in that plan boundary, great. That is specific direction from the city of Beaverton. But anytime you're doing something outside of that, you just want to make sure that the city of Beaverton takes action first to direct Bureau to do that, and then Bureau has that authority. And then the last policy 11, decisions on the expenditure of program income will ultimately be made by the Bureau Board as part of the annual budget process. And this is really to balance the previous policy 10. So even though we're saying that the city of Beaverton needs to authorize Bureau to be able to undertake certain expenditures, ultimately it is the Bureau Board that has the final say during your budget process on what you'll be spending those dollars on. The city of Beaverton can't force Bureau to spend money on anything. Bureau are the ones that get to make those decisions. And I think that's the end of our policy proposals. So the next step for staff and myself will be taking any feedback that we receive from you tonight and making revisions to the resolution language so that we have a final prepared resolution for you to consider at the meeting on April 22nd. And those questions again, do you have any concerns about any of the policy proposals? Is there anything important that you think these policy proposals have missed? And any details you want to make sure are addressed prior to final policy language? So thank you for bearing with me for that marathon speech on the policy language.
Thank you, Nick. We'll move on to some board member questions and comments for you. And as a reminder, just put your name in the Zoom chat and we'll get along to you in the order that they come in. So first we'll go to board member Hassan.
Yeah, Nick, thank you and staff for this presentation. Super appreciate all of this. As I was going through, you nailed the comment that I was going to make about the DE&I. So I took a pass at it. I'd love to hear what others think. I wrote engage in community development activities that center diversity, equity, and inclusion. I feel like I've gotten to put my hands on this, as have my colleagues on this board. So I'm really excited for the direction this is going. But I did sort of have this like moment of like, how are we integrating that one thing that we've been saying and putting it here in a more specific way that we're seeking it out. So that's just a thought for others to think about, but also open to other language. So really appreciate the work on this from you and staff and the community folks that have been participating. So thank you.
Thank you, board member Hassan. Mayor Beatty.
Councillor Hassan, can you say what you just said again? Like,
yeah.
The sentence.
Sure. I said engage in community development activities that center diversity, equity, and inclusion.
I think
Go
I
ahead.
like the language, but I'm wondering if we could have an amendment that like it needs to drive economic development, like, because that's really what this is. And I think there is plenty to drive economic development with DE&I, but I would feel really comfortable having that attached to this because that's really what Bureau is. I really like the sentence and the way it's written, so I would support it with a slight amendment.
Okay, thanks.
Could you put up 6, the parking one? Slide 6. Like, why is this and the other parking one not combined?
So there's one parking one on garage revenues. This is the revenues for both the garage and for fines and fees. And then the next one is on the expenditure of those revenues, I believe. If we look at 6 and 7, right. So one is how we're setting the rates, and the next one is where we're spending those funds. They could be combined. It wouldn't affect the actual policy. That's just how we distinguish them as setting the rates and spending the funds.
Sure. I mean, I would be for combining them because we're not separating really anything else that similar way. But I kind of like want to have tighter language, and I don't have a recommendation, but I'd like us to think about like, necessary capital improvements. Parking guard reserve fund is determined by parking reserve, adopted by Bureau. But like, we're going to have to think about what parking in the future looks like. Like if we start collecting in downtown Beaverton, how are these two programs connected together? And this program is astronomically expensive to run. And so I think cost recovery is an important tool that I don't really see in here. Like nothing should happen beyond covering our expenses. And then after that, we need to think about future capital, like capital improvements, but like what about future capital? What if we need a second parking garage? And so, and I also just fundamentally believe that we need to do this work in partnership with our special districts that voted alongside of us. And so I'm not sure where appropriate, but language to include them in some, like, anytime we're making decisions about money, it should benefit all the partners that sacrificed. And I don't think there's language on any of the policies that I could see that would do that. And so I don't know where appropriate, but I think we need an additional language piece that makes sure our partners feel seen in this work. That's all I have. Thanks.
Board Member Hartmeyer-Prig.
Thank you. I also like Councillor Hassan's proposal. I'm curious, Councillor Hassan, would it be another bullet on slide 2? Like it would be like one of the sub bullets of policy 2?
Yes. Sorry, I have, just for folks, I have a cell phone and a laptop. My audio doesn't work, takes a lag. Yeah, I thought it would be G because, again, I don't want to underestimate these other things. I just want to make sure we are naming it in a really specific way.
Yeah. I know as Nick, as you were kind of talking about this, like I was kind of like, do we throw it into the opener, right? Are we implementing guiding plans? And I don't know. So I as long as it's represented on the page, I feel really comfortable. Like I would like us, not just really comfortable, I would like really like us to see that on the page, as we are seeing a lot of people backtrack from a public policy. I think it's important that we recommit to ours, and I think that this is a good way for us to do that. And like, so I like Councillor Hassan's proposal. That was the only thing that I had specific feedback on. But Mayor Beatty, as you're talking about the parking stuff, it's very interesting, right? Because I know that part of in 7, it's talking about like, well, the program income from the parking garage needs to also like take care of the garage itself, which I think that's what the reserve fund is for, is like for the, and the necessary capital improvements. But I do kind of like the idea, I guess maybe it's just captured in other eligible uses, is like maybe future need could fit there. That kind of other gives us under policy 7, maybe gives us that flexibility. I would be curious to hear now or in the future, in response to Mayor Beatty's ask about how are our partners reflected in this, like, because in the financials that we approved in the consent agenda, right, you can see that sacrifice year over year. And we know that at the end of the lifetime of the district, that they're going to gain in the benefit of this investment as well. But it was also at the sacrifice of the years in between, right, where they didn't get that additional tax for their own purposes. So I think it's a really interesting one, and I don't know how to work it in, but I'd be curious if there's any sort of examples of other urban renewal districts that have done something similar, right? Because like this was partnership to make this happen. It's partnership for its continued life. And how can we kind of help, probably never quite repay, but like just show like that partnership.
Thank you, Board Member Hartmeyer-Prig. Go to Board Member Kimmy.
Yes, I just like to support Councilor Board Member Hassan's thoughts, and also Mayor Beatty's comments too. Since I helped write that thing, so I gotta double down on it. And also regards to parking, I have a question where the retail spaces within the parking structure, is that still considered parking revenue?
Maybe I'll take. Maybe I'll. Yeah, if that's okay, I'll go ahead and take that. Actually, the way that we have it in the budget right now, we have the parking garage and the retail in kind of one lump. But what we're doing for fiscal year 26 is we're breaking those two pieces out. So the retail is going to be its own separate fund, while the parking deck per se is also in its own separate fund. So we're trying to break those two apart, even though they're in the same vertical structure.
Okay, because I do agree with Mayor Beatty in a way that we might need the future parking in downtown area because there's such a shortage. And then I do not concerned, but I would like to have our partners to see the increased economic opportunities and revenue. So that's for future discussion maybe, but when we build parking structure in the future, maybe we should consider building retail spaces underneath so that it does bring in revenues and economic opportunities for the city and our partners, TBFNR. Those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Board Member Kimmy. Let's go to Board Member Hanning.
And I appreciate my fellow board members' comments regarding the special districts and taking us into consideration. My question is for Nick. On the slide where you were talking about how program income is not subject to the same restrictions as TIF, and you highlighted, some of those categories of the maximum indebtedness, project allocations limited to what voters had approved. I'm curious, kind of going back to what others have raised as far as that program income piece, is once the plan reaches its end, then what happens with, an ongoing garage and program income at that point? Or basically, is the program income subject to the term limit of the urban renewal plan?
Yeah, so good question. I think there are kind of multiple ways you could think of the end of an urban renewal area. One is when you hit your maximum indebtedness. When you hit your maximum indebtedness, you stop collecting tax increment revenue. You stop having impacts to the overlapping taxing districts. That is a major milestone, but maybe you still have debt to pay off. So the district still exists as you are paying off and spending those final dollars and paying off the debt that you have. Then when you fully paid off that debt, that feels like your plan is complete. But there's nothing that says the plan document itself needs to go away. If that plan document identified goals and objectives for the area and laid out projects that you wanted to see completed, the fact that you've paid off the maximum indebtedness doesn't mean that the plan has gone away. If you have other resources like program income, you can continue to use those other resources to pursue that plan. Some jurisdictions choose at some point in time to officially say that this plan is over. They'll adopt another resolution officially terminating or closing down the plan and acknowledging that they've completed what they wanted to do there. Once you've done that, the urban renewal agency itself still exists. And any of the resources that that plan area had continue to be the resources of that agency, but just no longer restricted to the particular boundary. Now, TIF revenues could only ever be spent in that boundary, but your program income would remain a resource of the agency itself. Some agencies choose to do additional plans at that point in time, or they could continue to just administer sort of programs citywide as part of their general authority with program income. But some jurisdictions choose to terminate the agency and no more meetings, no more budgets. We're not going to do anything as an agency anymore. And if that were to happen, then any resources that the agency had and any liabilities that they have would be assumed by the city council at that point in time. So any dollars that were left over would transfer to the city and the agency would be completely gone. So at some point in the future, the city of Beaverton and the Bureau Board will need to make those sorts of decisions. Do we want to keep this plan open? Do we want to keep the agency itself open? what sort of program income are we generating, and how do we want to make sure those dollars are being used now that we've completed the projects and the plan that we set out to complete. So those are all questions that will need to be addressed in the future. This particular policy document doesn't attempt to weigh in on those.
Thank you.
Board Member Henning. We'll go to Board Member Tifnot.
Thank you. No concerns about any of the policy proposals. This feels very, very fleshed out and solid. I love the addition that Councillor Husson proposed. I completely agree. And I completely agree with what Councillor Hartmeyer-Prigg had to say about that as well. And I appreciate the mayor wanting to collapse them down and streamline it a little bit. Just kind of dovetailing on that, I appreciate that you read them to us, because it's one of those documents that someone puts under your nose and it could be easy to disregard it, but it's important that we get the language right, because we might be referring back to this on some very critical occasions. So I don't think that we've missed anything. I think between this and the past conversations, we've covered the topics that need to be covered, and I'm looking forward to making some revenue after that.
Thank you, Board Member Tifnot. Go to Board Member Lair.
Yeah, thanks, Nick. As always, this is great. And I also want to support Councillor Hasson's proposal with Mayor Beatty's addition. Just real quick, in the spirit of streamlining and consolidation, do policies 3 and 4 really both need to be there? Or could we just make those into one? I mean, they say almost the exact same thing.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. We could absolutely combine them as well.
Okay, great. That's all I had. Thanks.
Great, thanks, Board Member Lair. I've got a few comments I'll throw in here as well. I really like this policy overall. I think Nick, you and the team and staff have done a really good job taking our feedback from October of last year and making some pretty nice adjustments. I really like the change in the focus area, so where we can spend program income. In the past, it was expanded to include anywhere in the whole city, and I like keeping this focus on the plan area, or if it's not in the plan area, at least if it's related to the plan itself or the 5-year goals. I think all of that is really good. I think you all tied that up well. Can you go to policy number 5? Yeah, this one. This final sentence here, individual loans must be approved by the Bureau Board. Can you talk more about that? Like, must be approved? I'm not remembering right now, like, do we approve every single like building improvement grant that we send out, or is that all staff level? Or like, what's the difference there, and why would we need to approve loans versus the grants that we already do?
Yeah, so even though it's not stated here anymore, because again, we went from multiple pages of potential guidance on this to this more brief language. The assumption is that loans are going to be focused on larger dollar amounts. If you're looking at small dollar amounts for something like a storefront improvement project, you want to get those dollars out in the community. You don't want to be tracking 40 different businesses that all owe a tiny amount of money to the city. And so for those smaller scale investments, we're not anticipating that you'd be doing loans for them. So if the loans are going to be on larger dollar amount projects, they should be less frequent. There should be fewer of them. And so it shouldn't be as big of an administrative burden to come before you. It shouldn't be something where every single month there's another slate of loans for you to approve, but should be a more rare occurrence. And again, this was, I think, staff wanting to make sure that it was clear that there wasn't going to be other staff just negotiating loans kind of on their own, that any loan terms that are going to be agreed to are loan terms that the Bureau Board is going to take ownership of. Also, for the Bureau Board, seeing that this current language is not very detailed, there could be trepidation about, well, what exactly are these loans that the Bureau staff is going to cook up? Well, you know, you can rest at ease knowing that nothing is going to be agreed to or approved without coming back to you in the future. I actually see policy 5 as being the one that's going to lead to the most immediate homework assignments for Bureau and city staff. You know, this sentence that Bureau may establish loan programs with clear guidelines. I suspect that that's something that you're going to be looking to work on in the pretty near future to say, great, we have a policy now. We're saying that we think that loans are more favorable than grants. We may establish loan programs. Well, let's talk about that. What is it that we'd want to accomplish with these loans? What would a program look like? How could we receive applications? All the kind of detailed stuff that we originally felt like we wanted to include in this policy document. I think it's going to come back to you relatively soon, not as some policy, but as a detailed loan program where you'd be rolling out and publicizing, hey, we are interested in doing these types of development projects, and we would be interested in loaning folks money if you meet X, Y, and Z criteria, and here's how you apply for it, and here's how much money we're setting aside. So I think a lot of this will come back to you soon in terms of establishing loan programs. But at the end of the day, we think that these are big enough loans. The intent is that they focus on large scale dollar amount projects that you'll want to be the ones that are giving final approval to them rather than staff.
Okay, got it. Thank you. That makes sense. I'm good with this language then. And then my final comment, actually, yeah, two really quick ones. I support the DEI edition with the mayor's edition of in support of economic development or whatever that combination is. I like those two comments together. And then my final comment is regarding somehow putting in the interjurisdictional partnerships in there. I have some concern there, and it's based on the fact that it's not just our governmental partners that made sacrifices, like the city made sacrifices here too. And the purpose of Bureau is not to make financial payments or some sort of partnership in that way to our governmental partners, but to increase the tax base. And I think we'd be getting away from the purpose of Bureau there. Now, if I'm misunderstanding anything that my colleagues are saying, or if this needs to come up again later, I'm happy to talk about it more. But I've got some initial concern there. Okay, and Mayor, I see you put your name in the chat too.
Yeah, I want to clarify that it's not, my attempt isn't about making payments, but when we're making decisions like to take revenue and spend it outside the district, when we start doing that stuff to serve city needs versus what Bureau is designed to do, which is generate revenue for everyone involved, that's where I start. And I get the, like, we might want to do it a block out, we want to do that language, but we have a responsibility as somebody that also ran the charter initiative. We promised our partners that everything would be made and with them and their decisions in mind as well. And so I don't think it is solely a city issue. And we might want a Bureau in the future. And so if we don't treat our partners well and we adopt something like Redtail or Allen Boulevard, like, why would they go along to get along? So I think making sure that they are represented somehow in our decision making is just smart business sense.
Interesting. Okay, thank you. That is some helpful clarification for me. Okay, thanks. That's all my comments, Nick. Anybody? Yeah, Board Member Hassan, I see your name just came in.
Well, to tack on to what the mayor is saying and what you're saying, like, is there a way, I'm just pulling up the actual resolution, like the language, and I'm just like, is there a way to acknowledge and recognize that we'll continue to work with our partners without explicitly putting it into policy? I think that's like what we're grappling with. And I didn't know, Nick, what your thoughts are, what that looks like in the final policy document.
No, that was exactly what I was thinking, that this presentation tonight focused on the policy language, but ultimately you're adopting a resolution, and a resolution comes before the policy recommendations with a 1 page of whereas this, whereas that, where you're laying out the sort of policy groundwork and how we got here. And so to me, I think putting in that background section of the resolution, a commitment to all of your partners and a recognition of the sacrifices that have been made and the importance of being a good partner to those other taxing districts, I think it makes a lot of sense to include it in that section as opposed to maybe trying to fit it into one of these existing policy proposals or add a brand new policy proposal on it. It could go either way, but that was my initial thought as well, is to take a look at that background section of the resolution to see if we can fit language in there that addresses that concept as opposed to changing one of the individual policies.
Okay. Yeah, I was just trying to find like a compromise, and just looking at that language, the first paragraph is so general that I wonder if it's somewhere there or in the whereas. So thanks.
I appreciate everybody's comments tonight. This was really helpful. Nick, really great work. We're really excited for this to come back and for us to be able to approve it and be able to keep moving forward with a lot of this work. So thank you for this conversation tonight.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll see you soon, and we will move on to our next order of business, which is Bureau Bill 2025-08, the future of the First Street Dining Commons. We'll be hearing from Megan Bronston. So Megan, whenever you are ready, you may kick it off.
Thank you, Chair Teeter. Board, good evening. My name is Megan Bronston. I work for the Community Development Department. And Chair Teeter, can you give me a thumbs up if you see my slides?
Yep, see them.
Thank you very much. Tonight, we are here to talk about the future of the First Street Dining Commons. I will be giving you a presentation with some updates as to where we've been since the last time I presented to the Bureau Board, and we'll be making recommendations for staff recommendations for potentially how to move forward. We then are going to be asking the Bureau to vote on two motions. The first is next steps for moving forward with the design process of having a permanent commons or not. And the second is regarding a test close of the commons potentially next winter. So the history of this space is that in June 2020, in response to the pandemic, the First Street Dining Commons opened. We basically closed an entire block of First Street between Watson and Washington. We put out tables and chairs, and then the Beaverton Downtown Association, in partnership with their partner Lionheart, put out their first tent to give some shade in a hot summer. Fast forward, the city took on more management of it for the first year, including more tents and creating a kids zone, et cetera. And ultimately, but within a year, Bureau began funding that. Fast forward one more year, so we're now 2 years into having First Street Dining Commons, and City Council actually approves researching making this space permanent. So while we had opened it in response to COVID and trying to help businesses, our restaurants specifically not close, it actually ended up being a wonderful community space that many were using. So in November 2023, after a year's worth of research, including some consulting work, staff came before Bureau, and then again in December, a month later, to City Council to give an update on what that research had been and discussed 6 potential options for moving forward. The results were did not end up choosing one of the 6 options at that time, as ultimately by the time we got to City Council, there were some outstanding issues that we'll give you updates on this evening. And then in June 2024, the Bureau Board in the fiscal year 24-25 budget approved $250,000 for the Commons, which we have used this year, $180,000 for management, and which leaves $70,000 to begin the design process. In 2023, this is a reminder of some of those key findings that we brought before the Bureau Board. We had researched a host of things. We had researched how the space could be managed and by who. The location, we'd done a full locational analysis, which had come up actually stating this space that we had chosen randomly in the summer of COVID ended up being a really ideal space for this use. We looked at size and potential amenities of a permanent space, and then funding. Specifically regarding funding, we looked at what about ongoing operations? How much would it cost to do ongoing operations of the space? And essentially, this is the slide that I showed at that time. Essentially, the bottom line was, if we get to the point where we own the equipment, whether it is temporary movable equipment or permanent equipment, we can then bring the management in-house. Because right now, we are spending management funds on renting the equipment, and we're spending funds on management and maintenance of the space itself. At that time and today, the only potential operations funding sources in-house, however, are the general fund, which we all know is tight on funds, and Bureau program income, which you had just had a presentation on. At that time, as I said, we gave 6 options. So option 1, say this was a wonderful short-term placemaking activity, but the funding is really just not there, and we decide to close the space. Option 2, continue it as it is, and frankly, this is what has happened over the last year, was we continued with having rental equipment and with outside maintenance staff. Option 3, we called this temporary use. This was saying we should buy the equipment. Let's keep it temporary. Let's keep it something similar to tents and tables and chairs, but the actual what those items were, we had not declared yet. But something temporary that's easily movable and but that we own it. Because of its temporary nature, the potential sources for that one-time cost of buying that equipment could have been general funds. It could have been, we could go out for grants. It could be Bureau program income, but it couldn't be Bureau tax increment financing because it was for temporary items, not permanent infrastructure. And in 2023, our estimates for this was 460 to 880,000 for both design and buying of the equipment and installation. Option 4, we call temporary use plus streetscape. So this was the same thing. We go out and we buy movable equipment. However, the sidewalks out there are in very poor health. Not only are they in some cases less than 4 feet wide, there are no street trees, there are no lights, there are no bike racks. We have broken curbs in some places, and they really need to be upgraded. And so if we want to say this is an ongoing space for pedestrians, then one of the #1 staff recommendations at the time, which actually goes through all of the rest of these options, is let's improve the sidewalks, make them up to today's code, which would be 10 to 12 feet wide. Let's add street trees and street lights and the amenities that a street would use, but frankly, so would a pedestrian space. For this, because it was permanent infrastructure we were suggesting for the sidewalk portion of it, Bureau could help with the sidewalk streetscape element of it. Again, general fund, grants, and street fund could potentially come into this. It could be eligible depending on the nature of improvements and funding availability, which at least at the time was not a lot. Then we have option 5. You're going to hear more about this later because this ended up being the option that we're recommending today. This is what we call the flexible option. This is a flexible street that has the ability to open and close as a plaza or as a street at will. And here it had permanent infrastructure that allowed this to happen. And the one-time potential sources here could be Bureau because it was permanent. It could be general fund, grants, street fund, et cetera. And the cost estimates for both design and construction were 1.7 to 2.1 million. Again, full rough order magnitude estimates back in 2023. And then option number 6 was permanent plaza. So this was, it will no longer be a street. We are creating a pedestrian-centered space that would lift everything to sidewalk level and make plaza basically from the NACWAM building all the way to the Lionheart buildings. So from building to building front, and make a plaza in Old Town. Here we're estimating the cost at 4.2 to 6.4 million with similar sources as we've had before. So when we presented this to Bureau and then City Council, and specifically at City Council, it was decided not to choose which option we wanted to move forward because there were several questions that were outstanding that needed to be answered. And so what Council did do, however, was give a nod to the city manager stating they want this to be an ongoing amenity. They just didn't know specifically how we were going to move forward to accomplish that. So some of those next steps, we want to give you updates, some of those items, those questions from that day. The first one was THPRD partnership. So the question has come up, would THPRD potentially be interested in owning and or managing this space? It was within the THPRD and City of Beaverton partnered Parks and Open Space Plan that was adopted a couple years ago. And I can say that staff have been in regular coordination with THPRD. City staff and THPRD regularly are communicating at various levels. However, that coordination over the last year and a half has been focused on higher level strategic issues. We have a lot of partnership activities going on. So no commitments nor any opposition has been identified to the commons. It is just not something, a topic that has risen to the top for discussion. Admittedly, a future council or THBRD board joint work session could be used as a formal discussion for this partnership, is one idea should you wish to move forward. The second item needing updates was Bureau Program Income Policy. You guys just heard all about it and are almost there. The way that this would affect the commons, however, is my understanding of the way that the policy is written that you reviewed this evening is that Bureau would decide on an annual basis how they want to be able to use the program income funds that are available to them. So on an annual basis, you could have the discussion as to whether you wanted the funds to be used for ongoing management of the commons or purchasing temporary items. The third was to the City Council meeting. Bureau Area Chamber of Commerce came on that 2023 December meeting. They offered to do additional business outreach. And so in August 2024, so 8 months later, they did do a walk-around survey to those who were available during the walk-around, business owners, to answer their questions. They reached out to 43 businesses, 31 of which were willing to answer the commons questions. And they provided this data and allowed us to share what their findings were here. They went to both Old Town and Beaverton Central. The question, in what way does the commons benefit your business? 18 of the businesses stated it doesn't benefit them, and 13 said it did, and then it gave elaboration as to how. The second question, do you experience any challenges associated with the commons? 12 said yes, and 16 said no. And then just some general conclusions. There was a lot of narrative discussion that occurred. So first, the survey did not include any businesses directly fronting the commons. The farther from the commons geographically, the less it had direct effect on the business. The closer to the commons, the more polarizing the answers. The range of businesses that stated that it benefited them was pretty wide. It wasn't just restaurants, for example. It had retailers and service businesses alike saying that this was something that benefited them. And the primary complaint listed about the commons was related to parking. So with these updates and with all that we have learned over the last several years, today's staff is coming to you with 2 recommendations. The first vote that we are requesting that the Bureau Board make, we're really giving 3 options with one of them as a recommendation. The first option is to choose to close the space and state that Bureau is just not able to continue to fund it as it has in the past. The second is to continue it as it's currently managed, with renting tents and tables and chairs and that sort of thing, and outsourcing our management of the space. And then option C, which is our recommendation, is to move forward with the design process, which should take approximately a year to design a flexible space. So this is the flexible street that has the ability to convert into a plaza regularly. So this is the more detail of that recommendation. So again, it has the improvements of changing the sidewalks so that way they meet today's code. It includes street lights and trees and street furnishings, and is a wider sidewalk. But it leaves the street, so that way this could be opened as a street whenever we wish. So this is something we could close and just have the First Street Dining Commons open during the summer, or we have open summer plus events, or we have open just on the weekends. We can make that decision, and that will be part of the design process, is to identify how we want that ability to move forward. It can include things, permanent plaza infrastructure, like removable bollards, similar to what Crescent Street currently has in front of the Reeser. It can have permanent poles in the sidewalks themselves, so it's not in the street, it's in the sidewalks that then are strong enough to hold a covering over the top. It can have buried footings within the street for play equipment or other amenities. And this design also offers the ability, we could install food truck or retail truck infrastructure. We can install the infrastructure needed to have a bathroom trailer there during the summer, or a porta potty corral. The prices, again, these were the prices that we showed in December 2023. For design, we estimate that it'll cost between $400,000 and $600,000. And again, the sources could be Bureau. along with general fund grants or street funds. And then construction will be about 1.3 to 1.5 million with the same sources of money. Now, here are the staff impact. We had been rating what the staff impact was between the 6 options in 2023. This one says high because we might need to do some legislation to talk about the things that we would bury within the street. Are those allowed or are those not? I would guess that it's probably a lot less legislative uplift than the option 6, which was we are going to build permanent buildings in the infrastructure. But there may still be some legislative lift, which is why we have maintained that inside. So if approved, if the staff recommendation of the 3 options is approved, next steps would include adding this to the capital improvement program, as one of the projects, releasing a request for proposal for design services here in a few months. Once we have the design partner, they would also be partnering with community engagement. We would do community engagement. If I was a guessing person, I would guess that we would first start with creating the vision of doing community engagement regarding creation of a vision, and then ultimately the design. It would include all stakeholders. So while we talked a little bit about businesses earlier, all stakeholders have been reached out to during the various elements of this process, including residents, including users of the space, visitors, et cetera, and businesses and property owners, of course, would be included. And may include exploring a name change. I know that's mentioned in this group before that we might want to do a name change, but once we have, that would be at later phases of the design once we really have the vision for the space. We would also request additional design funds. The $70,000 that's already in this year's budget for us to do this isn't enough for a full design process. It just is enough to start it. So we would go ahead and request the additional funds probably in next year's budget request. One note, the Bureau 5-year action plan that was adopted last year, it did not anticipate Bureau was going to be funding ongoing management. So the overall number on that line item in the budget, if Bureau funds design, construction, and management, it may need to be changed. And we also realize that additional partner management discussions are probably going to be needed. So that was recommendation number 1 that we're going to ask you to vote on. I have a quick review of recommendation number 2, and then I'll open for questions. Second recommendation is to do a test closure this winter. Each time I've come before Bureau or council to ask, do you want to close for the winter? In the previous years, we've said no. To be honest, the last couple of years have seen a downtick in use of the commons during the cold months. This might be, while future amenities and programming could maybe change this behavior, that's probably a good time to test a closure if we're going to test a closure. And that data could really help the design process of how often do we want to keep this open. The engagement, because we want to use it as data, we already have an engagement plan for before. We would then also want to do engagement after to really use this as a good data collection opportunity. It would also, some of the benefits would also be responsive to feedback that we have received on a variety of fronts regarding opening parking spaces, especially during the cold and wet months. And a closure would result in a savings to the overall management budget. Though do note, Bureau actually owns a lot of the items that are out there, and we'll have to identify how to store those. Okay, those are the 2 items. So I would like to open up for questions and then ultimately hope that someone opens it for a vote. First vote is the 3 options. Are we going to close, continue, or staff recommendation of start design of a flexible space? And then the second is a vote on test closure. And so I will then open it up for questions.
Thank you, Megan. Do any board members have questions for staff? And we've already got some names in the chat, so we'll go Mayor Beatty first.
It's harder than it looks, Councillor Teeter, to listen and look at the chat and get people in, so you'll have to be more kind to me in the city council meetings. So I'll just start with there's nothing I don't want to close it in the winter. And if we do it, I think the reason that it's not doing well is it's not programmed. And every time we have these meetings, we talk about why aren't we working with a partner to program it? If the amount of management fee that we're paying, I don't want to say crazy, but I mean, like it should include programming. Like this event needs to, this space needs to include programming. I could see winter markets there. I could see, I was just there for a meeting last week, events on Friday. Our community's asking us to do this. And so if we test close it now, but what are we testing? Like it's not programmed. So like, yeah, we could close it, but I think we'd be comparing two different things. I probably would vote no if that's the motion tonight. I think there's more out there, particularly that we own the stuff that is going in there. I would want to be very bold and vacate this street. So if the Bureau wants to go this way, this is a compromise I could participate in tonight with this temporary closure, but I don't want to give staff the opinion that because we're going with this temporary option that we're going to open and close it. So much of people's habits is about coming and going, and the height around people's anger of feeling like they're losing out on all of this parking will just be heightened if they can park there sometimes and not other times. And so I think behavior is what we're trying to drive and fix here. And I think programming would also help that behavior and help there create more value out of this space. Up to food trucks. I mean, I'm not opposed to it, but I really think what our community has been asking for that I think is a miss is entertainment. There's a lot of restaurants around there. There's food carts walking distance from there already. So just thinking about programming that isn't centered around restaurants would be my hope, unless it was market or festival driven. I think that staff need to start looking for grants. There's a lot with Metro around placemaking. There is parks and nature grants we could be going after. And so I would hope that we could be very creative here in this funding mix. I think Metro is a very logical partner. I also think THPRD is a very logical partner. I think their fears around infrastructure, I understand, but if we help solve that, this seems like a good partnership opportunity for them to do programming and something, frankly, they're better than us at. So thanks.
Thank you, Mayor. All right, Board Member Kimmy.
Yeah, thank you for the presentation, Megan. I gave a lot of thought into this. I use that space all the time, and I'm out there meeting people because coffee place over there is always packed, so you end up on the chairs in the front. Even though I love the space, I looked at in Bureau's policy and what Bureau is looking for, plus our investment. It started since 2020, and we have spent close to like $800,000, I would say. And we have no way to track our ROI, no way to track how it benefited the businesses around it, immediate and then around the businesses, how it's impacting the business. Because Bureau is supposed to spend the money to have economic opportunity and revenue sources, but we have no way to track it except subjective findings where I like it or I don't like it. It's very subjective. There's no concrete data. So I was looking for that, but I still don't have one. And then surveys that Beaverton Chamber did, there was no clear winner here. So about 60% opposed rather than for it. And then businesses that I talked to, they said, whatever, they could live without it or with it. So there's no like jubilant need for it. And the possibility of using our general funds for the future, and also possibility of street funds, where I think the street funds should be diverted, only deals with the streets. We have a lot of potholes and other sidewalks that we need to work on. So unless we speak to THPRD and have a solid plan, I think opening up ongoing without having a clear vision is, I don't think that's a really good investment for any economic value. So I'd rather close it on a condition that we clearly have a funding source other than the city, and also a THPRD partnership who's going to maintain the space, and also have a clear vision. That's what the needs are. So the patrons who use the place love it, but the business around it, they're not really supporting it. So that's why I'd rather close it until we have a solid vision. So that's my comment.
Board Member Kimmy, Board Member Lair.
Thank you, Megan. It was great. I'm going to echo a lot of the points that Councilor Kimmy made, and this is me trying to separate myself as a Beaverton resident who loves the First Street Dining Commons versus a member of Bureau. And at least as it's currently being managed, I'm looking at the 7 goals for Bureau as approved by the voters, and I'm not really seeing how this hits most of any of these goals. I mean, maybe you could make an argument with business support, but we just saw the survey that only a minority of the businesses in the area even support this. So it seems tenuous that if this is going to continue as is, that it really fits what the voters approved with Bureau. I think that changes a bit if you make this something more permanent, because then you can argue, well, this is redevelopment. Maybe this is something where it's boosting the value of businesses. I don't think businesses or property values are going to be boosted too much by some temporary structures that could be taken down at any time. So I guess my feeling on this is that if this is going to continue to be a Bureau project or within Bureau's purview, then it needs to move towards something more permanent. And if not, then if it's going to continue, it needs to be more of a city thing rather than a Bureau thing.
Thank you, Board Member Lair. Board Member Tignan.
Thank you. I've always been on the fence about making it a permanent installation since we were still in the shutdown when I first joined council, and we were looking at it as an asset during the pandemic. It was very popular. It helped out the businesses a lot. We came out of that and then saw that there was a certain like fan club of the First Street Dining Commons that use it regularly for reasons that just work really well for them. I agree with the mayor that it's one of those things that if you don't know it's there, it's not going to be your destination to go and utilize it. I also hear what the businesses are saying about the frustrations that they have with the current configuration of that area in wintertime, when it's rainy and it's cold, and people do tend to want to park closer to wherever they're going, and that parking lot looks pretty far away, even though it's only a couple of blocks from there. And so I like the idea of a flexible space that gives us an option like Crescent Street, where we can program out really eye-catching communal events that are city run or run by one of our partners, but also still having the flexibility to meet the businesses where they're at and listen to them about what they're seeing, because they can literally look out their window on a daily basis and tell us if they think that it's performing or not. And that's the one area that I don't know if we need to go so far as to have a full-on closure over winter. First and foremost, I just like to see what the numbers are. What are the counts? What are the current counts? What are the counts by season of how many people are using it? What time of day? Are there peaks like on weekends? Just to have better data at how it's being currently utilized to help us inform how much investment we want to make in this versus other areas that are going to fall within the loop. So I'd say where I'm at right now is somewhere between a B and C. I think that there's still a little bit more work to fully define this out. But all that being said, I'm working on a project for a client right now that's going after the construction phase of a streetscape project that's very similar to this up in Puyallup, Washington, called Meeker Street or Meeker Festival Street, where they're doing something very similar with the bollards in place. They can program it out as a thoroughfare versus shutting it down to be a pedestrian-only plaza. And I'm just starting to look at that, but I'm very curious how their conversations have gone out since they did decide to make it flexible on if there's a rhyme and reason to when they would program it out. Like, is it a summer thing? Is it a just for events thing? Because that's the one area that I think we'd want to make sure we're being really intentional, is we don't want to just create something and then hope that the market uses it. like hope that we come up with great ideas for it and we end up with 4 a year. And then the rest of the time it's not really doing much for us in terms of the investment. So I'd say more data on how it's being currently used, ideally by date, time of day and season, and then maybe a little bit of comp analysis of how this is playing out in other communities. Because if we're doing this and another city that's kind of similar to us in nature is doing it, I'm guessing that this is happening in other places too that maybe did that, like had an outdoor space that they thought was temporary during the pandemic and ended up with something that feels like there's a there there. They're just still trying to wrap their heads around exactly what that is.
Thank you, Board Member Timonon. We'll go to Board Member Hartmeyer Prigg.
Thank you. I have a couple questions. I want to echo, though, Councillor Timonon's point about the data and utilization. I would love to see that, especially before I decide if I'm willing to do a temporary closure, because my instinct is no, for the same reasons that Mayor Beatty gave. I'm concerned about it being open and closed. It's already kind of a risky intersection with lots of pedestrians walking by. And so if it can change with it being open and closed, it makes me kind of nervous. So I'd be curious to get some more of that data. I know that the Chamber's been a really great partner and that the information that was shared, is about their outreach, but I'm curious, like, do we know, like, what businesses were interviewed? Were any users of the space interviewed? Because I think that it's still like a small sample, right? To be able to like really use that to help make my decision.
So I'm going to take that as a question.
Yes.
Remember. So I can say that it only included business owners. It was only business owners who were available at the time. As I stated, it wasn't business owners. They didn't choose any that were right on the commons. And most of the ones that we regularly hear from actually weren't included. And I can say that this is the third, maybe fourth business only survey or survey where we could pull out business owners that we've conducted since the commons opened. And I have to say all of them have been small enough sample size that none of them would be considered scientifically relevant. And so they're all anecdotal points of time of business owners who were willing to answer that survey and were available at that time, even though we've had various other methods. So even the largest survey we did, which was the parking related survey we did 3 years ago, where they had 1,200 responses, it was still about the same number of businesses who decided to respond, even though, so the rest were residents, users, that sort of thing. So, and so so the Chamber did not do any other folks other than business owners. You asked about users.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, and like, it's not a massive area, right? So I understand that, like, maybe it wouldn't even get to the size of a statistically, That's the
word I was looking for.
Yeah, I can't, whatever. Yeah, you know what I'm trying to say too.
Yep.
So, but I'm just a little bit curious because I think that hearing from our users, like, Director Lair, your call is making me go back and like look at our guiding principles and look at like, even just like on our homepage, it states like there's like 4, I've lost it now. Oh, here. Create a vibrant downtown, growing local business, enhance livability for all, and building diverse housing are the 4 of the plan promotions that we like list on our homepage that are tied to the Central Beaverton Urban Renewal Plan. And I see this as being really getting after all of those things except for building diverse housing. But also we've been talking a lot about creating like a third space. I get to sit on the MEAB, the Mayor's Youth Advisory Board, and for young people, like third spaces they're just not that common, like they've been trying to create their own like third spaces. And so this to me has just become that natural third space. And so I'm trying to ask for data so I make a data informed decision and not like an emotional one, because there's so much feel good I think that comes along with this. But then there's also the safety side of it. And I think about if you're in downtown Portland and you're coming up, I don't know what street it is, but when you get to Broadway, those stanchions come down between the theater and sometimes it's closed right before you get to the park blocks. And that works there, but I think it's because like you're at a stop, there's this traffic signal there. It's very well like lit up there. It's a very like it's a huge mechanized structure, right? And you have a way to get around it safely. I would just be really nervous that unless we had this like really significant thing that I think would blow the budget to make it just extra safe for those times that it's closed, I would be really nervous about the flexible nature of it. But I also love that like it can be, it has like multi-purpose, right? But I do get really worried about opening and closing the street. In terms of funding, I know that in our 5-year plan, we did secure, or we've got about $2 million over 4 years, right? The 250 that you mentioned, right? We've spent 180 on it. I guess my follow-up question would be, you also mentioned if we wanted to do a temporary closure, Bureau owns a lot of the stuff that's out there. So I'm kind of curious, what are the rentals that were like, you know, to Mayor Beatty's question about what are we getting for that amount is like, if we own a lot of the stuff out there, why is it costing us so much to manage? And I thought rentals were a part of that. And it seems like we would get pretty close to having enough to do our design plan with the remainder of this year and next year's funding.
Great question. So we rent the tents, the lighting, the and all electrical, etc. Part of that is that they come out on a weekly basis and review everything. All things that we have purchased, that same rental company made and therefore maintain for us on a regular basis. And so it's not as simple as rental and management. It's
Okay.
and then we have a separate contract for managing, i.e. coming and taking out the trash and cleaning the tables and that sort of thing is a separate contract.
Okay, thank you. So anyways, C is where I'm leaning. I still love the idea of the permanent, but I recognize there's just a lot of challenges and that's a significantly higher cost. So option C is where I'm at, keeping in mind the safety aspect and how do we, you know, really like, I'd prefer it stay, the street stay closed all the time. And then the other question was the temporary closure. And I would not be, I would also be prepared to vote no on that tonight without more data about the usability or the, not usability, the usage of the space.
Thank you, Board Member Hartmeyer-Prigg. Go to Board Member Nye.
I think I'm fairly in line with the mayor on her opinions here. You know, I think the winter usage of the space is pretty low, but it's also the covered area and the furnishings in there are not an inviting space currently as designed. I think a lot more people would use the covered portions if it was actually comfortable to be in there. As far as like the chairs are really uncomfortable and like it's just not a great place. And I think it's such an amenity and creates civic vibrancy in that space that, you know, it kind of goes from City Park and then you've got that and then you can come down to the round. It's just a nice sequence of events along the future Loop Street that I think we should build on that instead of just letting it go. But I agree, it does not work as it's currently set up. So I think continuing as is doesn't really make a lot of sense. And I'm not in support of opening it. Partly because I'm skeptical that the long-term plan would include parking on that street anyway. So I feel like we're going to give the business owners a false sense of what they're going to gain by temporary usage of that street. So.
Board Member Nye. Board Member Husson.
Yes, I have a question or two and then some comments. Megan, can you help me understand liability with that space? So we did happen to go there and have a seesaw incident. It was not lovely. It's okay, but I'm just trying to understand who's responsible when these kinds of things happen. It wasn't pretty, but it's fine.
You can't sue the city, you work for us, just, you know.
That is why. That is why I'm trying to understand.
I would be making best guesses, and I'm feeling as though I will have to get that information back to you so that way I'm honest with my answer.
Don't you think recreation immunity would cover this? It covers our other spaces, everything else we do.
Potentially. I also think that the answer is a little more complicated as there are insurance implications. It depends on why, maybe.
It's
right?
okay. You're
Because
not
we
gonna
because
say
we rent
anything
the
here.
because we rent the equipment, right? And so depends on
Okay.
if the tent falls down again, like in the first year, that might be a different thing. Then we own the seesaws. So
I get
Sorry,
it.
let me
We're
ask one more down question on this. While you're going to answer that question, if rec immunity doesn't cover us, does
Okay.
it cover us if we make this permanent? So I think that's a question you just opened
For the
important
attorney.
can of worms, but that needs to go to the attorney.
Okay.
So thank you, Meg, and thank you, Mayor. Like, I just want to make sure that's really clear for everyone's knowledge. The kids fell off the seesaw. It was not great, and the seesaw fell on my ankle. I'm fine. Clearly, I'm walking. But there is a major concern that I think our attorneys and folks should be thinking about when it comes to liability of the space. Okay, I am meshing stuff. Did we not do a study on times or usage or utilization? Am I thinking of parking?
We did not. We ultimately did not do that, other than best practices of other folks at the time.
Okay, thank you. I just want to say I really appreciated the full story that you showed. Like, I feel like I saw myself going with you from the last like 3 to 2 years of this discussion. I want to be really clear. I think this is a beautiful space. I love it. I've utilized it. A seesaw fell on me, and I'm good. I do worry about what I'm saying no to. It's what I said last time. I was a supporter of option A back then. The council really wanted it and supported it, and so I wasn't going to be like the lone no. So I was really supportive. I am deeply uncomfortable with using anything that's not our own Bureau funds. Counselors know on this council, we are dealing with another $10 million deficit. That is, general fund money that I don't want us to say that we have. I would say the same about streets and the street fund and the work that we need to do across the street. So I want to be clear. I love this space. I think it's beautiful. I believe in third spaces. I think those are really critical. And I am highly concerned about what we could be saying no to by saying yes to this. So I am leaning quite heavily toward option A because I'm thinking of the financial implications, my ankle. And I do think that a test closure, I don't see the usage in the winter. And so I would support that, but I'm also supporting the closure, which, I don't know where other folks, well, we've heard from a mix of folks. I don't want to say closing this means for me that we aren't thinking of activating it again or doing something in the future. I think it's just thinking about what we need to be doing right now to be able to get through the next few years. Thank you.
Board Member Hassan. Board Member Hanning.
Thank you. Can you, Megan, I appreciate your presentation. Can you help me understand a little bit better the funds that have been currently covering the cost for management of the space? But then I also saw in one of your slides just the reference to the proposed program income that we will be considering adopting in April, and how you see those two potentially being options for the future.
Absolutely. Welcome to the board. I think this is the first time we've met, so good, welcome.
Thank you.
So the funding for the last few years has been using Bureau program income because it is ongoing management, which can't be using to funds, and so that each year this board has decided to fund that over the last several years. If this board were to continue to fund ongoing management of this space in its current rendition, i.e. we don't own all of the equipment and we are outsourcing management, then it would continue to be from program income. If we were to purchase our own equipment, any of the original 4 of the original 6 options, or in this case, option C, Once it is constructed and we have permanent infrastructure out there, it is assumed that that cost would then of ongoing management would actually probably go to our public works operations team. And this would be one more city space that it can manage because it's something that we own. They're part of purchasing all of those sorts of things. Now, I believe that most of that is funded out of general fund. And so by adding another space, it would include potentially an increase to their general fund budget to be adding one more space that they are managing. Did that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, everybody. I will chime in with a few questions of my own as well. I'm in pretty strong support of the mayor's comments and board member Nye. I definitely would like to move towards a permanent closure of the street, vacating it. I could support option C here. I think it would just be a real loss if we were to permanently close this. There is a lot that goes into Bura and that goes into making a healthy downtown that's a lot about creating an identity of a place. And for many, many years, if you asked people where downtown Beaverton was, they would say, I don't know. And then you would say, you are actually standing in downtown Beaverton right now. And I think the city and Bura has made such huge strides over the past several years to start shifting that. And they've done a really great job. And the dining commons is a big part of that. I think we should recognize the dining commons was a pandemic response, the pandemic needs, business needs. Board member Kimmy, I know you brought up return on investment. There was some data we had seen earlier on about pandemic support for those businesses and which ones would have had to close without the dining commons. And we would have lost several restaurants without this resource for them. That said, it's been several years since the pandemic has ended. So the return on investment that we are looking for might be a little bit different. And so I come back to the goals of this space. It initially started as that pandemic resource, a pandemic response. I think it has expanded to be much more similar to what one of the points that Councilor Hartmeyer-Prigg made about safety and how just dangerous that intersection of Watson and First is, and how there are benefits now to the dining commons that go beyond just business support. It's community identity. It's about placemaking, making a space, a third space where people can hang out and gather and support the neighboring businesses. I know when I was with the Downtown Association, one of the business owners was asking me back then before I was ever on city council if the space was going to become permanent. And they were saying if it did, they would likely expand their business and add a patio of their own and build off of it, but they didn't want to make that investment being up in the air about what the direction is. And we're still up in the air. So I think we need to move towards actually making a decision on the direction that we need to go, because we've been doing it continuing as currently managed for quite a long time. And I think we need to make a decision. There are 12 parking spaces here. In the grand scheme of downtown, that's not that many. And in the evening hours, they would likely be full, but I think this is tied more to our enforcement program. Parking is full in downtown in the evenings because we don't enforce it. And so I think there are other solutions that we should look for to solve the parking problem that are not just closing the dining commons. I would also be very cautious about a test closure because I think it's been mentioned a lot. If we close it, people might not be sure it's coming back and would never try to come back to it. I know I've seen people out there who live in Hillsborough and Vancouver and they meet up here in the middle because it's a good space for having a drink or food outside in a middle ground space. So I think I'd be very strongly in support of making it permanent, but I think a compromise for me would be flexible space. I would not want to do a test closure because we haven't even tried doing official programming on it. That said, there has been programming in the space when there have been events in downtown like Halloween or like the bubble tea events and things like that, where when there are events in downtown, it doesn't even matter if they're in the dining commons. That space gets pretty popular, pretty well used. And so I think we just got a lack of programming. And I don't want us to give up on it now. I think that'd be a real loss for us. So that's all of my comments there. I see, Mayor, you put your name in the chat too.
Mr. Chair, members here, in the spirit of compromise not being a dirty word, I move that we vote yes on staff recommendation, or I move that we vote yes on staff recommendation option C.
Okay, there's a motion on the
Second.
floor. Okay, Board Member Hartmeyer Prigg seconded. Okay, is there a discussion on the motion?
I'll just add, Mr. Chair, that, you know, my hope of what we heard from a lot of people tonight is the funding issue. I'd like staff to work on a funding strategy with Metro. There's money in there. I've been looking at them. I think that there are other ways to fund this. And some of the concerns about the street, like if we remove the dining commons, we have to fix those sidewalks. These are a lot of this is we're going to incur no matter what we do. That street has to have sidewalks that are upgraded, street tees to make our design. So we don't walk away from all of this by closing the dining common. And I'm with Councilor Teeter. Once we take away this, it's going to be really hard to bring it back.
Thank you, Mayor. I see Board Member Husson.
Yeah, I know that the motion on the table is a little opposite of what I had in mind, which I think is fine. I think my one comment or thought to you all, and I'd love to hear from folks if folks want to share, is that we've also been losing businesses to downtown. And so that's just the other thing that's sitting in my mind is like, what are we doing to support them? I know it's unrelated, but I want to feel like we are putting our eggs in the right basket.
Board Member Husson. And I see Board Member Kimmy.
I want to say I do love the space. I mean, I use it all the time. It's just the fact that funding is an issue for me, and also programming is issue for me. I understand it was needed during pandemic, but after that, last 2-3 years, or at least 2 years, the people who's been using it has decreased. And then unless we revamp the space or with the programming and with the thought into it, just opening up to continue to opening up, I really don't see our benefit of it to the businesses also. We think it is, but businesses are telling us that it's like they could live without it. So who are we serving? And that's been on my mind for a long time. I would love to have it if we have a lot of money, have a vision to build it, but it's just what we want. But do we really need it? At this time is the struggle I have. So, you know, so that's my thought. Thank you.
Thank you, Board Member Kimmy. Board Member Allaire.
Yeah, so I'm supportive of this. I think given making this more of a permanent type structure, absolutely would make this fall within the Bureau mandate. But I'm going to echo what essentially everybody else said, that if we're really going to get behind this and make it work, there needs to be programming. I mean, we can't just put some permanent stuff down and, you know, if you build it, they will come. There needs to be extra work that goes into this. And if that happens, my opinion is this is going to be very successful and a huge benefit to downtown.
Board Member Lair. I'll add one final comment here. When we're having conversations like this and talking about Bureau or city projects, there are some projects that come around just once in a lifetime, and I think this is one of them. I don't think that there will be another shot to do this sort of thing. I think if we want to do it, the time is right now. And so I will vote yes on this. I see no other names in the chat, so we can go on and have a roll call.
Vote for number 1, option C, made by Beatty, seconded by Hartmeyer Prigg. Councilor Duggar, oh, sorry, he's absent. Board Member Hartmeyer Prigg.
Yes.
Hassan.
Yes.
Kimmy.
No.
Teeter.
Yes.
Tivnon.
Yes.
Beatty,
Yes.
Manning,
Yes.
Nye,
Yes.
Walton is absent. Lair,
Yes.
you have 8 yes, 1 no. Motion carries.
Thank you. We got a second vote that we need to make. Is there a motion on the floor?
Mr. Chair, I move that we should not vote close the dining commons over the winter and rely on the advice we just gave the board, which was to find programming and find resources.
Thank you, Mayor. Second by Board Member Lair. Is there a discussion on the motion? Board Member Tivnon.
Yeah, I'd just like to reiterate this idea of monitoring performance as it is currently being used. I know that we're talking about programming and actually giving people more incentive to go and use it, but we have heard very loudly from some of the businesses that are over there that there's long stretches where there's nobody using it. And I'd like to have more of that kind of information because I think it will help inform how we program it out. So I hope that will just remain something that is a priority along the way and that we get regular updates on it.
Thank you, Board Member Tivnon. Board Member Hassan.
Thanks. Sorry, I just want to take a moment to process this. Megan, can you remind me, just if you could help me understand, why was the staff recommendation to close? Or was that the staff recommendation? Or if you could just talk to me a little bit. Oh, there you are. It's like, hi.
Sorry, the lights like to go off here at City Hall. I don't know if you guys have noticed that.
Yeah, if you could just tell me a little bit about that, and I just want to understand the implications for you all if I were to support this motion.
Of course. So the staff recommendation here was what we had been hearing, what we'd been hearing from going back, frankly, and rewatching the Bureau meeting and the City Council meeting from 2023, and all of the comments we've been getting from the community, et cetera, was that the flexible option would probably be it. So that way, even if now we put in all this infrastructure and you all decide for the next 10 years, we never close it a single day for the next 10 years. If at that 10-year mark, you're like, actually, let's close it for the winter, right? Or the council at that time, if you all aren't the councilors or if you're board members, you would have that as an option. The making that decision, going back to board member Tivnon's comment about data, having the data as to what the impacts of closing versus opening are, we have made guesses as to what that is. And so this was a suggestion to gather that data. It isn't, I mean, obviously it's up to this board whether that's something that you want us to do or not.
Would there be any cost implications?
You would save money if we don't pay for ongoing management or renting of winter tents, et cetera. We might have to still pay for storage, as I mentioned, but it would save about 1/3 of the budget for ongoing management for next year if we were to close it and reopen it as a street for that time period.
Okay, so there is some money savings to close it.
Correct. To close the commons and reopen as a street.
Okay, and then as these budgets were created, were we anticipating this change, or would that have to come back again? I'm just trying to understand the implication if we were to.
You all have not voted on next year's fiscal year budget. So your answer tonight will impact what goes into what you all see in June.
Okay. I'm happy to support this since it seems like it has a minor financial implication. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. I see no other names in the chat, so can we please call the roll?
This is for vote 2 to not close the Winters Common and direct staff to follow feedback from tonight's meeting. Made by Beatty, seconded by Lair. Board member Hartmeyer Prigg.
Yes.
Thank you. Hassan.
Yes.
Kimmy.
No.
Teeter.
Yes.
Tivnon.
Yes.
Beatty.
Yes.
Beatty,
Yes.
thank you. Hanning,
Yes.
Nye,
Yes.
Lear,
Yes.
and 8 yes, 1 no. Motion carries.
Great, thank you, everybody. And Janine, before you jump in, I'm going to ask us to take a 5-minute break. So Janine, you'll just have to hold on a few minutes. That's okay. So we will return at, my clock says 7:49. We'll return at 7:54. It's been 5 minutes, so we can go ahead and open it back up. Janine, you are our last business item, Bureau Bill 2025-09, the Hall and Center redevelopment site update. So Janine will be updating the board on the Bureau-owned Hall and Center property on key elements prior to releasing the request for qualification solicitation later this spring. So Janine, we are ready for you now. You can go ahead.
Hey, great. Thank you. Okay. Tonight we're here to discuss the Holland Center redevelopment site ahead of solicitation. Janine Lambert, Senior Development Project Manager. This is a follow-up discussion from our January discussion where we decided to advance this to potential solicitation this spring. So tonight's discussion, we will be providing a, sorry, I'm on a laptop and it's hard to see everything. We'll be having a brief discussion on the background of the site and an overview for the redevelopment and then the solicitation elements that will be included in it at a high level, and then seeking your feedback on the elements and proposed draft schedule. So as a quick overview, it's a 1.6 acre site in the downtown regional center mixed use zoning. That is the only property in the Bureau portfolio of the 5 total properties in the RCMU. The rest are in the RCBC, which is a little bit higher density zoning district than the RCMU. So RCMU has 75 feet height as of right, up to 120 feet, subject to some standards as a maximum. It is located right in between 2 major light rail stations, the Beaverton Transit Center, as well as the Beaverton Central Station. In July of 2021, Bureau acquired this property along with the Lombard West site together. This property was acquired vacant, the building and the property. And then in July of 2023, just 2 years later, the Bureau Portfolio Redevelopment Strategy for this site and the rest of the portfolio was approved, guiding at a high level. This is a slide, a little bit background on that portfolio redevelopment strategy. The site we're talking about tonight is at the intersection of Southwest Hall and Center, where Center Street then turns into Westgate going into the Beaverton Central District. There are the 5 total sites, multiple properties acquired and assembled to get to those 5 sites, totaling 8+ acres. Total in downtown Beaverton. The strategy is at a high level, providing guidance with vision and goals across the whole portfolio of all of the properties. So the 8 goals listed here on this slide, not every property needs to achieve every goal, but our portfolio should be looking at this holistically at the whole level and addressing this as best appropriate for each particular site's needs and timing, with a flexible approach in the redevelopment strategy. Development goals that we'll be proposing to advance for the Holland Center site that should align with that strategy at that high level. Having urban form density and mixed use activation. So developing a landmark structure at that intersection, signaling a gateway into a district that has the research at the heart of the arts, and we'll have an innovation focus as we move forward with trying to attract more office users well into the future as well. So having some ground floor commercial anchor that is market rate would be appropriate, but not subsidized. With mixed use housing above market rate with the vertical housing development zone tax abatement as an incentive for that market rate housing. This is in the downtown VHDZ. There's 7 VHDZ districts. Downtown is 1. And in the downtown, as well as the Cedar Hills districts, there is an additional local requirement for a percentage of affordable units over 20 units. So some affordable housing would be required if a developer chose to use VHDZ. Incorporating creative, innovative workforce on the ground floor, public art, programming, and unique architecture are all tools that could be deployed at this site to signal sort of a change in use and a gateway. Some cultural, educational, or event anchors that don't require subsidy would also potentially be a bonus. Not necessarily a bonus in points, but as a part of the overall development goals element that we'll talk about in a little bit. We'd be seeking transit-oriented development. We mentioned this is right in between 2 transit center locations, so really encouraging reduced dependency on automobiles in this location would be great. And one of the things that we'll be looking for are improvements in the right-of-way to better support pedestrians and bicycles. And in addition, there is a small amount of floodplain at the southwest corner of this property. And so utilizing green building and innovative open space and infrastructure principles that blends the support of the infrastructure as well as people and wildlife in the area is important. The evaluation criteria, so the first one I mentioned briefly on the last slide was development concept broadly. How well is it achieving the goals that we just discussed? Number 2 is financial feasibility of that development concept, development time frame. We advanced this site in the portfolio for release, so we would get more housing sooner, more mixed use housing sooner. And we're hoping that a developer is able to move quickly as we advanced it quickly. Capacity of the team, so financial capacity. Things are, challenging right now. Generally in the marketplace, there's some uncertainty, but also availability of the team members that they put on the team to move a project forward. A private-public partnership experience, and then the development team experience more broadly. So we talked a little bit about the VHGZ as a potential incentive, subject to state authorized extension beyond this year. It expires at the end of this year currently, and we'll be tracking that as that moves forward. Hopefully that gets extended at the state level. This provides a partial property tax exemption up to the 10 years. And we talked about the affordability requirement in this zone. And then we also have the potential for SDC credits for publicly provided open space. The threshold at the moment is a 1/4 acre minimum or a creative solution. A 1/4 acre in our downtown is going to be really challenging. So creative solutions would be sought. The schedule we're looking at, we had our first discussion on this last month. We're talking at a high level this evening. There's no March beer meeting. We'll be meeting with URAC to discuss this as well and get some feedback and drafting the solicitation and working with staff on site information to append to the solicitation. In April, we'll be coming back, April 22nd meeting for the next Bureau meeting in which we'll be seeking approval for the RFQ, similar to what we did for the Lombard West site last month in January, and releasing the RFQ before May. We would have the RFQ responses due in the June timeframe, and then committee review and responses and any other analysis that we would want to have performed in-house or out-of-house support for that. And then meet with Bureau at the next meeting held in August to recommend the developer and enter into an exclusive negotiation agreement for a period of approximately 6 months. So with that, I wanted to open it up for any questions and get your feedback on the high level elements that would go into a solicitation coming to you in April.
Thank you, Janine. Are there board member comments or questions for Janine on this topic? Yes, board member Hartmeyer Prigg.
Thank you, Janine. This one's just exciting. I think we talked about the importance of this property at our last Bureau meeting and the opportunity here. So really excited to see what it becomes. And I think that the plan you proposed looks good to me.
Thank you. Anybody else? I've got 2 questions. Both are related to the open space requirement. Can you actually go back to that slide? Was it this one? Yeah, was it this one or was it the next one? Oh yeah, okay, this one. So our open space requirements in code, do balconies or like rooftop patios, do those count towards the open space requirements? I feel like I remember that in planning commission applications.
Maybe I'll try that one. Yeah, I'm not the code guy anymore, and I would want to defer that question to our planning team for sure. Jennifer may be able to answer that as her planning commission days. I don't know if Jennifer, I'm putting you on the spot or not.
Yeah. Yes, balconies count towards the code required open space. Probably not towards THPRD SDC credits though.
Okay, got it. Yeah, I've always just kind of wondered about that. Like if we've got open space requirements, especially if it's near a creek or watershed or creek or a wetland or floodplain, it's always just been interesting that balconies could count towards that. The creative solutions for open space, meeting open space requirements, Do you all have any examples of what those might be, or is that meant to be very open-ended for developer options?
So that is THPRD's language for the ability to receive an SDC waiver for open space, which would have to be then, I believe, deeded, I think is the requirement too. So there are a lot of restrictions in order to get those SDC requirements. It's not necessarily a development concept proposal requirement for our solicitation, but whatever would be required by code is something for a minimum of open space, we would hold that. But if they wanted to have an SDC waiver for open space, that's what they would have to meet for THPRD's rules.
Okay, got it. That's very helpful. Yeah. So THPRD jurisdiction, trust them. All right, that's good. Mayor Beatty.
I just want to say that I like the plan and the direction we're going, and that the lobbying team is following the vertical housing credit. We've already given a lot of feedback and testimony and communication on it as a tool that should remain in local government's hands.
Thank you, Mayor. I was actually wondering about that too. Okay. Well, Janine, I don't see anybody else chiming in, so I think that just means that we are all excited about it. It's easy to support, so let's keep it moving forward.
Thank you all.
Okay, our almost last item on the agenda is the executive director's report. Andy, do you have any items or things to share with us tonight as part of the executive director report? And Andy, you are muted. We see the screen.
Sorry, I made a fancy slide to fit in with all the other hard work that the rest of the CDD is doing, so I figured I should at least do this. Yeah, just a couple things to touch on, knowing that we still have an executive session after this. The team held a Lombard West pre-proposal meeting at the beginning of last week. We had our partners THPRD there to answer some questions too. We had over 70 participants that participated in the meeting. The intent was really to provide an introduction to the site and give teams kind of an explainer on the goals of the site and provide them the opportunity to ask questions. So it was great to have that amount of interest. And as a reminder, proposals are due near the end of March 28th. And just the other piece is, you can see that image there. That is a new art piece, Ripple, that was being worked on for installation last week and a bit of this week too. That's a companion piece on the Crescent Trail, a companion piece to Ribbon that's in the Reeser Plaza. And it was the same artist that did Ribbon, is the same one that's doing Ripple. And so it still has some work left to do. We have some touch-ups and lighting, but it should be a cool piece when it all is said and done, especially at nighttime. And I want to recognize our partners over at Public Works for providing a lot of key assistance to our partners at Matchless Builds who manage the installation. Public Works stepped up, especially during that cold week, to do some excavation and help out with installation. So that's all I have, Chair Teeter.
Thank you, Andy. Any questions or comments for Andy? Okay, Andy, you are getting off easy here. Yep, don't see any names in the chat. Okay, our last item on the agenda is executive session. So we're going to move into executive session in accordance with ORS 192-660-2E to conduct deliberations with persons designated by the governing body to negotiate real property transactions. Pursuant to ORS 192.6604, it is the Bureau Board's requirement that the items discussed not be disclosed by media representatives or others. We will not be taking any action after executive session, so our next meeting is April 22nd, 2025. So good night to everybody who has been listening, and Bureau Board members, we will see you on the other link.